Are you struggling to discern distributions from reaccumulations? No worries, you are not the only one. I got the same question in my last video and I do think this is a great question, so stick till the end and you will learn everything you need to know. Best thing to do when you want to trade distributions is to trade with a downtrend. You can see distributions as supply zone where sellers come into the market. At every high in the market, there's a possibility for a distribution to form. Thereby, these distributions have a higher chance to continue the downtrend, and this will make it easier for you to take a great trade. So now we know you want to trade distributions with a downtrend, we can look for potential point of interest in the market. I almost always use two different points of interest. First, we have our redistribution, and our second point of interest is when we have a change of character. But first, a redistribution. And a redistribution is completed after we break our structure. So here we have our break of structure. And the distribution can form anywhere inside the redistribution, but I prefer to see it at a 50 or the 80% of the redistribution. So when we pull out a Fibonacci and we measure from the high to the low of the redistribution, the 50 to 80% is my most important point of interest. When your distribution forms lower inside of the redistribution, so below the 50%, there's a higher chance for it being a reaccumulation. The second point of interest is when we have a change of character or your first break to the downside. When we create a change of character, we can measure the last move up and we use the 50 and the 80% again for our point of interest. I like to call the move to the downside, so the break where we have a change of character or mitigation candle. Because this is the move we want to mitigate. I prefer to see a distribution above the 50%, but a lot of times it does not touch the 50%, so this is something to be aware of. Of course, this break to the downside can also be another distribution, so there always is a possibility for distribution to form inside of a bigger distribution. So we have our distribution here, and we break our schematic or distribution, and we measure our shakeout or your uptrust within a distribution, again with a 50 and 80%, and we want to see a new distribution form above the 50%. I've got an example of a redistribution, and we can see we have a Fibonacci and we have our point of interest, and we made a distribution within our point of interest. We broke the distribution and we tested the distribution again. So there was a great point of interest for a redistribution. I also got an example of a change of character. You can also see this as a distribution. It's just your personal taste. We got a 50 and 80% again, and we need to go on the lower time frame for this. And it won't get me lower than the 2 minutes, but at the 80% we have a distribution. So these were two examples of two great points of interest for distributions to form. Now we know where good distributions form, we can also look at where reaccumulations form, or where distributions form with a high likelihood to fail, because a failed distribution will turn into a reaccumulation. So first we have a distribution forming after we have a change of character to the upside, and we form inside of an imbalance, so we are not in the supply zone. And second, we have our change of character, and we break the downtrend. So when we break the downtrend, the distribution is not in a valid supply zone, and we have a big likelihood that the distribution will fail, and we start an uptrend, and the distribution will turn into a reaccumulation. So here we are at EURUSD, and we can see that we have our reaccumulation. We break our structure. So my bias is to continue the uptrend. And when we look at the lower time frame, we can see we form an accumulation at the 80% of the reaccumulation. And after we have our accumulation, we also have our change of character. So for me personally, I always see a change of character different than a accumulation. I see that as a break of schematic structure. So now we have our change of character, and when we look at the lower time frame, we can see our distribution, and it forms above the or after the change of character. So it is not in a valid supply zone. So there's a high likelihood for it to turn into a reaccumulation. So we have our accumulation. We test our accumulation for 80%. So this was a very great buy opportunity. And we break our structure. So we form a reaccumulation. And the distribution failed. So again, we break our structure and we see another distribution, and the distribution forms after we have a change of character. So my bias is, or my idea is, that it will turn into a reaccumulation again. And we start buying from the 50% of this reaccumulation. So next week I would like to see us continuing the uptrend and eventually break this high. So now we have the full picture of distributions and reaccumulations. So the last thing to understand is that distributions have the potential to turn into a reaccumulation when they are not in a valid point of interest. Now we know that. First you need to check the trend. This will give you a better chance of guessing if it will be a distribution or a reaccumulation. And the second thing is to know whether we are in a good point of interest. And once you have this figured out and you have an idea of where the market will go, you have the best chance of guessing if it will be a distribution or reaccumulation. But it is very important to backtest this properly before implying it on the markets, because it will give you a headache if you implement it right away. So I hope you had some value in this video. So please subscribe and watch this video if you want to see Wyckoff and smart money in action.